Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. Engagers, today we have somebody from slightly far away, at least from where I am. I am in Madrid, and Munch Lam, or Mun Choong Lam, is in Malaysia today. So Munch, are you prepared to engage?
Awesome. Hi, Rob. Of course, I'm always prepared to engage 24/7.
Let's do this. Let's go. So Munch is with us today because he is one of the persons that we met very recently in Gamification Europe in Amsterdam. As you can remember from our very recent post, he was also one of the panelists present in this panel that we had, and he was one of the main people who was speaking that day. And we have him here today. Let's make a very brief intro of who Munch is. He's a serial tech entrepreneur based in Singapore, and he is intrigued by how technology is fundamentally transforming how we socialize, learn, lead, work, and of course, how we play. He's the founder and CEO of Selfdrvn, that's written self, like in self, then DRVN, Self-Driven Enterprise. It's a software as a service solution provider to help organizations improve workforce engagement and performance with positive psychology powered by mobile, AI, analytics, and of course, gamification. Is there anything, Munch, that I left out of that interview, of that intro?
No, thank you so much for such a great introduction, Rob. It brings back memories of the great panel that we have in Gamification Europe. I think, with you, I think the panelists managed to really engage the audience there. And I think we got a lot of good feedback after that around, what is really the essence or the heart of good gamification.
I think so too, and I would invite anybody listening to this episode right now, if you haven't listened to it already, I would invite you to go to episode, I think it's 64, where we were in this panel. I would really invite you to go for it and listen to episode 64 as well. It's very, very nice. We have Munch, we have Juliet Denny, we have Will Stewart Jones. Very, very, very interesting things that we've talked about. But today we're going to have a special interview just with Munch because we want to know a lot more about what you're doing, how is Selfdrvn going, and what are many of the things that you've learned along your way. And in that sense, we always like to get started, Munch, with understanding how our guests are living their lives regularly, because sometimes we see the people who are great gamification designers or who have these platforms, and we think that they're like these superheroes, over there so far, and we don't realize that they're real humans just like any other of us here in the Engagers. So Munch, can you tell us what does a regular day with Munch or a regular week with you look like?
All right, Rob. So for me, I'm working mostly out of Asia or Southeast Asia, but our solution, the team that we have in Selfdrvn, as well as our clients, are actually spread across quite a wide region. So we have the majority of our clients in Southeast Asia, that's Singapore, Malaysia, the Philippines, and so on. We have also started to build a customer base in India and in Europe as well. So the thing about my schedule is that I would usually plan my schedule around my client meetings because I believe still a face-to-face interaction with client is the best way to get to know them and to get to understand their problem and to help us present the best solution possible. So I would usually plan my schedule around client meetings, and that usually involves a lot of travel. So I'm typically in maybe 3 or 4 different countries every month. And then, in between, whenever I have time, I would try to do regular catching up with my team. Sometimes when I'm in the office, I'll meet them. And most of the time, we're actually working or collaborating remotely through something like Skype.
I would say that you're mostly traveling and meeting with your team. That's most of the time that you're spending right now. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. And if I get some time off after work or during the weekends, I try to go to the gym. I meditate. In fact, before this interview, I was actually meditating. So that's how I would usually spend my day.
Nice, nice. Actually, now that you mentioned meditation, I remember that I was looking into meditating for a while, but it was a gamification friend called Mike Finney, the one who actually got me into the app that I've been using to meditate regularly. And I think it's been like a year and a half since I started.
Right,
Not not
right.
not doing too bad. It's like 10 minutes a day, but it's better than nothing.
What's the name of the app, Rob?
The one that I'm using is the one by Dan Harris, a American reporter. It's called 10% Happier. It's pretty interesting.
Cool, cool. I actually also make use of gamification to help me meditate better. I got a headset as well as an app called Muse. It's from the United States as well.
Yes, I've heard about it.
And yeah, I have a friend who is also developing something similar to actually help people learn how to be more empathetic, how to listen better, how to be more focused and be more mindful using gamification techniques as well as some brain scanning headsets. So yeah, I think gamification is very well applied even in an area like meditation.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you mentioned, being empathetic, I think it's a crucial ability if you want to design somebody for somebody else. And of course, if that means
Yeah.
you're designing gamification in whatever capability you are, you certainly have to be empathetic. But now, Munch, I want to move into the first like stronger question, so to speak, one of the strong plates that we have in the podcast, and it's this question that we like to frame as our favorite fail or failure moment, a time when you had this first attempt in learning, and you approached the problem, it didn't work out as you expected, you had some sort of failure, and we want to know, what did you learn from that, or how did you come out of that failure? We want to hear the full story, from the ground, and listen to it and learn as we go through it with you. Do you have such a story, Munch?
Yes, in fact, I do. So I think when it's come to specifically learning gamification, my journey started in 2012 when I tried to engage my own team, using gamification so that everybody would learn better, collaborate better, and in the end, deliver great results for our clients. I think I was happy with the fact that because it's my own company, I have more control over how I would like to run things, how I would design the games that would engage my employees. And I got a fairly good result out of that. And I think what I tried to do after that was to maybe do the same thing for different companies. So one of the companies who approached us were really intrigued by our story of how we managed to improve engagement, getting people to be more engaged, interested in their work, perform better, paying more attention to their health, and so on and so forth. And the company wanted us to do the same thing for them. And I thought, oh, that's a piece of cake. They have more or less the same kind of employee demographics that we have. They are in the same country as my company. And I thought, wow, that should be a piece of cake. And of course, 6 months later, we figured out that wasn't the case. That was my first big learning in how to do gamification better. And I think the mistake that I made in that particular case was because I think the client and me, are both very fascinated by the whole concept of gamification and game mechanics. They have done their own research and to us, gamification was like a new shiny object. So we were really eager to take what we have learned and try to apply it to the audience, which are the employees. And I think the mistake that we made there and then together was because it was a solution looking for a problem. So we didn't fully understand the problem we're trying to solve with gamification. So we didn't dive deep enough into understanding what do we want to engage employees for. And therefore, we got a lot of excitement over the gamification platform that we launched in the first 3 months. We get a lot of engagement, but subsequently, once the novelty factor has worn off, I think the employee starts to wonder. So what do we do with this? How is this relevant to my work? How is this relevant to my own success and all that? And then adoption level starts to fall. So I think from this particular example, I think what we have learned is that gamification is not a silver bullet. I think it is not the right solution to every problem. More importantly, I think we need to understand the problem we're trying to solve really clearly before we can figure out if gamification is the right answer.
Absolutely. In fact, that reminds me, and I'm going back not to Gamification Europe 2018, but to 2017, when Andrzej Marchewski presented his solutioneering. He mentioned that sometimes we have a solution looking for a problem, and that's probably the opposite of the way that we want to design. And I think that's a very valuable learning. And however, I had to say, it's not the same for somebody else to tell you much than when you see it in your own practice, when you actually do something and you find out that, yeah, what I had to do was find first what was the problem I wanted to solve and then actually create a solution. So congratulations for such a massive learning. I can see that from that time in 2012 that you went into that. You certainly have grown a lot. Your company is doing great. So I'm sure you've had many key learnings from that you have been applying, and that leads us into the next question as well, very very nicely, because the next question is, when a story of a time that you faced a very big, those big hairy audacious goals or challenges that we sometimes face, and you solved it actually using gamification, game thinking, game-based solutions, call it how you will. Can you tell us that story, Munch?
I guess right now I could still say that the biggest challenge I've solved using game thinking is really an engagement or employer branding that actually helped my company accelerate our growth. I would say that at that point, back in 2012 again, we were a really small company with 20, 30 people, and we have very limited resources when it comes to whether it is in terms of the reputation of the company, the brand of the company, or any marketing budget to, in fact, help us go out there and compete for the best talent, the best employees to join us. And it was a big challenge then because we have customers who are actually waiting for us to deliver solutions to them, but we didn't have a team to help us do that. And it was, as you know, in the so-called tech sector of software, I think company like ours is facing competition for talent from some of the best companies in the world. In my part of the world, we are competing for talent against even the likes of Google and Facebook. And it is, if you like, David versus Goliath challenge when it comes to going out there to compete for the best talent. And I think gamification help define us as a company. So when we go out there, we are able to demonstrate to potential employees and job applicants very clearly that we are a different kind of company, where even from the smallest thing that we do for employees, we try to think for the employee standpoint. So we even have built an app to try to engage employees. And for a small company, that was something that was that really stands out. That was something that really sticks in the mind of a lot of people we talk to. And I think that was something that helped us grow our team 10 times in terms of headcount in a matter of 3 or 4 years.
Wow, that's impressive, Munch. Can you give us? I love that story because it's the story of how gamification actually helped you solve an actual problem. Can you give us a little bit more of details, a little bit more of ground level details of how was it that this application helped you engage your employees better? Because I know your solution is fantastic, and we talked about it a bit in Gamification Europe. So I would like to have the engagers know a little bit more of what this implies, what this entails, how you actually got them to be so engaged and to grow so fast.
Okay, so I think gamification may sound very complex or technical to a lot of people, but I think what fundamentally really works in gamification, one of the things that really works in gamification is really the fact that gamification, some good gamification makes sure that the good behaviors are recognized in a timely manner. Put it very simply, So when we're playing a game for fun, every time we do something right in the game, there is instant feedback from the game that tells us that we have done well. It can come in the form of points being scored or players able to level up and so on and so forth. So we take the same thinking and try to say, how do we make sure that we recognize good behavior, good performance as instantly as possible. So one of the things is that we did was we always try to get customer feedback, for every project that we have done, for every request that we have fulfilled for our customers. And what we did was essentially making sure that whenever we get a customer feedback, as long as it is a good feedback that we want, either the customer have rated us 4 out of 5 star or better than that, we go out there and make sure that employees are recognized as instantly as possible. So just by doing something as small as this, we can already see that it is changing the behavior and motivation of our employees. So we see that our employees want to do more projects and complete more customer requests in a much shorter time, because I think once they get used to the idea that whenever they do something well, they get the recognition, they want more of it. So over time, it has become a habit. And we go down to designing gamification around even very specific behavior or very specific role in our company. Take, for example, one of the problems we're trying to solve in our company is that we have customer support engineers who actually work around the clock. So depending on, some of them may have to take, work night shifts or working on national holidays or working over the weekends and all that. And in a typical support organization that has to support customers around the clock, you would normally see higher level of absenteeism around the less desirable
schedules,
shift assignments, schedules, or the graveyard shift, for example. Would usually see that more people will call in sick maybe in the last minute because it's something that they really don't want to do. So we have employees who are fairly young, and they will come back and give excuses like, doing night shifts is really bad for my health, it's bad for my lifestyle, it's bad for my social life, etc., etc., etc. Somebody's got to do it, there's always a lot of unhappiness and dispute when it comes to such work assignment. So we created a game around doing night shifts and so on and so forth, where support engineers actually get to level up. If they take on more of such undesirable schedules, and then whenever people do a lot of that, they get recognized instantly, and then they get level up, they get better standing in the team.
Yeah, they get the recognition that is something that they're certainly expecting, and that's something that will definitely motivate somebody. Whatever that recognition looks like, if it's meaningful for the employee, they'll be happier doing whatever it is that they're doing. And it doesn't mean that the work will be different. As you say, night shifts are things that have to be done. Somebody has to do them. There's many ways to recognize them, and of course, if you're getting them to actually be doing the same shifts they were doing before, but just be happier in their job, I think that's a very good objective to obtain, and of course, the company is going to benefit from that as well.
Yeah, I guess adding to the fact is that the support engineers may be feeling unrecognized because most of what they do are operational jobs. It's the same thing every day, and that they are pretty much the unsung heroes in the company. They don't do the most glamorous work, but they are the ones who make sure that customer stays happy and all that. I think in the typical support organization, not a lot of attention is paid to recognizing these unsung heroes. So when we just make that very simple gesture of saying that just by doing something as simple as taking on night shifts and working on weekends, we are giving you special titles. We're giving you put yourself at a different level in the team. And of course, in our case, there were points awarded as well whenever people do the right things. And those points could be used to redeem some real-world rewards. So I think we really got the attention of support engineers in gamification when one person in the team who was very hardworking and who was very dedicated in taking on night shifts actually managed to level up and use her points to actually win the latest iPhone during that time. And
Nice.
she managed to do that in a matter of 6 months. And that immediately got the attention of the entire team to a point where we see a 360-degree change in terms of behavior. So a year after we have started gamifying the whole idea of support shift assignment, one of the support engineers actually came and talked to me, and interestingly, he came and said, "Oh, I think my manager is being unfair to me." And I said, "Why is that so? Why are you complaining to the CEO about your manager?" And he said, "Well, my manager is not giving enough night shift to me, and he's giving more night shift to my team members." I'm like, this is rather strange, because 1 year ago we used to hear the opposite.
You would hear people complaining about that. So
complaining about having to do more night shifts. So in a matter of a year, we managed to literally turn the thinking or behavior expectation of the team 360 degrees. Now people are going after what used to be undesirable assignments.
That's fantastic. And very quickly, Munch, do you have any, when you're gamifying something, do you follow any sort of a process? Do you have some series of steps? Very quickly, in just 1 minute, do you have any sort of process? And if you do, what does that process look like?
Right. Yeah. So over the years, I think we have learned from our success as well as failures, and we've come up with a 7-step process to what we think will help us create engagement. I think a lot of it is basically grounded in design thinking. The first thing that we would think about is step 1 is really for us to understand employee needs and motivation. What we mean by that is, when we are dealing with, most of what we do is enterprise gamification, where generally we have to figure out if there is a common way to motivate a very wide variety of audience, ranging from a data scientist who has a PhD and probably is making tens of thousands of euros a month, down to perhaps a support engineer, who is working slightly above minimum wage. So the idea is to understand that, because we're dealing with different audience, they have different needs and motivation, and therefore we need to understand that before we talk about any sort of engagement or gamification technique. The second thing that we think is very important is whatever we're trying to do, I think engagement or gamification becomes more effective if we put some thoughts around doing something or designing something that would simplify the job they are doing today. So gamification, is definitely a lot more than just adding fun and engagement, but just the if we're able to achieve the effect of making their job simpler, that tends to add to the level of engagement and motivation, right?
Absolutely. What will be
Yeah.
the next step?
So once we've figured out the audience we're trying to engage, the next thing is to try to operationalize the company culture and values into what we design. So take for example, if we are designing using gamification to try to solve a sales performance problem for a bank who has a very competitive culture, then our design will incorporate more elements of competition. If, however, we are trying to solve the same problem, but for a company who has a more collaborative culture, then we will try to incorporate more elements of collaboration in our game design.
Definitely, definitely. That's
Yeah.
the side of the culture of the organization that you're working in. So, as I understand it, up to now, you use things like design thinking and similar to understand very deeply who you're working with. Then you take a look as well at the organization and what's the type of culture that the organization is trying to push for. Is there anything that you do after you figure these two things out?
Yeah. So the next thing that we try to do is make sure that we do good recognition. So as I said, I think something that would universally motivate people, regardless of their background, if you like, or their job role, or their job titles in the organization, is always about recognition. I think most companies in the world, most managers, most leaders do not do enough to recognize employees. So we want to make sure that recognition is a big element in whatever we design to engage employees. Only after we have thought through all this, we start to think about how do we apply game mechanics or gamification in our solution. Last but not least, after we have got the right game mechanics in place, we start to make sure that what we design as a solution or platform will be more effective by thinking around how do we use digital nudges to make sure that the engagement, the behavior that we're trying to cultivate becomes a habit. So we do that by, making sure that, again, going back to making sure that we simplify the job of whoever we're trying to engage. We improve the ease of convenience of them to do what they're supposed to do. And with technology, we try to make use of real-time alerts and reminders to make sure that the message doesn't get lost, when the people we're trying to engage are busy and distracted and perhaps are multitasking.
Yeah, and that's the way that you actually turn it into a habit. So that's a very, very interesting process, Munch. Thank you very much for that. Just a quick break before we continue with this episode. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's at RobAlvarezB and the hashtag ProfessorGame, all one word. And in Facebook, you can find the Professor Game page. Thanks in advance for your engagement. Munch, now we're going to go into this sort of the second part of the interview, and here, more than the stories and the full explanations, we're going for sort of rapid fire questions, things that, the first thing that pops into your mind is what we want to know. What are you thinking? So the first thing that we would like to know is if there's anything that you feel that is sort of a best practice or something that almost any gamification project could benefit from having. It could be a strategy, an idea. What would be your first thought on this?
As I have actually mentioned in our panel during Gamification Europe, I think gamification projects would benefit a lot from thinking around nudging to create behavioral change. I think we perhaps as gamification practitioners we have focused a lot on game mechanics and game design, but I think a lot of benefit can be derived from thinking around how do we nudge our audience so that the behaviors that we want to cultivate can become a habit.
Yes, definitely. That's certainly a very, very important practice for gamification. And shifting a bit once again, Munch, what would you say is your favorite game when it comes to entertainment?
Right. I used to be a gamer. So during my study days, I used to play a lot of games in those days. There was Doom and Ultima and World of Warcraft and all that. And having said that, I think I have spent a lot less time playing games these days. And I play games sometimes just to de-stress and to distract myself from work sometimes. I play a lot less game these days. My favorite game at the moment is perhaps a very simple mobile game called We Bear Bear Repairs. So it's really not a spectacular game in any way, but I like the game because I think there are some uh, cute cartoon characters, cute elements that I could relate with, and some children that I play with could relate with, and that kind of help us keep the interest and conversation going. So the characters in the game are actually in a TV program on Cartoon Channel and all that. So that helped, and they actually built a very good storyline around, how a player could help the characters in the game accomplish certain missions around repairing museums and a park and all that. It's a game that's very simple in its concept, but I think what I really like about the game is that they have executed some game mechanics really, really well. That makes the game very engaging and very addictive.
Nice, nice. Very sounds like an interesting game. I haven't played it myself, I have to say. But Munch, is there somebody that you would like to listen to in an interview like this one in Professor Game?
Yeah, Rob. I think my current obsession with gamification is probably around learning how to use nudges better. So I would love to interview somebody like Richard Thaler, who is a behavioral economist, behavioral scientist who has actually won the Nobel Prize. And I've read some of the books that he's written, and I would really like to talk to him in person.
Nice, very, very interesting. And in that same sense of books that you were mentioning, if you had to recommend one book to the engagers, remember an audience who's interested in gamification, game-based solutions, these kinds of things, what book would you recommend and why? It doesn't have to be gamification directly, but of course, it would be something that would interest an audience like such.
Right, Rob. Quite a while back, when I was trying to relearn gamification, I actually read a book written by an author called Brian Burke. So the title of the book is Gamify: How Gamification Motivates People to Do Extraordinary Things. Again, I think what I really like about the book is, first of all, it's about gamification. It's about using games to help businesses and organizations succeed. And secondly, I think it was written in a very simple manner and to the point. So within the first few chapters, you can really get the gist of what good gamification is about. So this book called Gamify by Brian Burke is something that I would recommend to someone who's really interested to understand the essence of gamification.
Sounds super, super exciting. I haven't read it, Brian Burke. I think I do have read something from the author, or I've heard something about him before. But it sounds very, very interesting because it's what we've been talking about as well. Figuring out what is the objective. What do you want to achieve, and actually achieving that when you are using gamification for such a thing. And Munch, people always have things that they do best and things that they always have a team to help them with their, what we could call a weakness. But what would you say is your superpower, the best thing that you do when you're creating gamification? What would be your sweet spot?
Right, Rob. That's a hard question. If I have to,
I have to say most of my guests are humble enough to say that this is a super hard question.
yeah, my superpower is really in empathy, having good empathy, in understanding very diverse audience. I myself, I'm a 48-year-old guy who is, from Asia and all that, but very often I'm asked to design solution that actually help engage, the millennials, for example. So a lot of our clients are trying to better manage, better motivate, better retain a multi-generational workforce, and many of them are trying come to me and say, so how do I engage the millennials? So I think we have succeeded to some level in understanding what millennials want. And I think my superpower in this case would be really that my ability to empathize, to understand, how millennial thinks in the workplace. I managed to validate that when I probably did some play acting in trying to a millennial audience to essentially try to see if they agree with the kind of persona that I'm projecting, to see whether they feel that it's really representative of their aspirations, their motivation, and so on. So I think I've gotten some really positive feedback around that, and I think I've done well in that space.
And that makes a lot of sense because you're doing a great job at achieving such an engagement from millennials. But Munch, however, we're almost running out of time, so I wanted to leave you a few more seconds to know if you have any final piece of advice for you to let us know where we can find out more about Selfdrvn, about Munch, if it's in the internet, social media, wherever you want to guide us. And then, of course, we'll say that it's game over.
Right. Awesome, Rob. I've had an awesome time. So if you want to contact me, you could always go to LinkedIn and search for my name. My full name, in fact, is Mun Lam. Alternatively, to get some to get in touch with us, to contact me for that matter, you could also go to our website. That's at www.selfdrvn.com. And Selfdrvn is spelled SELFDRVN.
Yes, that makes sense. We will have this as well in the show notes. If you want to see the full show notes, all the links that we've been talking about, all that jazz, you can always go to professorgame.com, look for Munch, MUNCH, and you will arrive to the show notes of this episode. Once again, Munch, thank you very much for your time. We know you're a very busy CEO. You were very busy doing many things, and you took out some time, you carved some time out of your schedule to be with us today with the engagers and to provide all of that value to speak your truth and show us the many things that you've learned along your journey. So thank you once again very much for that, Munch. However, now it's time to say it's game over.
Thank you, Rob.
Hey, engagers. Thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Munch Lam of Selfdrvn. And do you have any questions that you would like to ask to future guests? Then go to professorgame.com/question and ask your question. If selected, it will come up in a future episode and you will get your answer. And you will be soon knowing who is going to be in the next episode. So go ahead and subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.